turn the beat off for this.
Saskatchewan's building codes are administered municipally, and here's where it gets interesting. Many rural municipalities have minimal to no building code enforcement for properties outside organized hamlets. The province uses something called the Uniform Building and Accessibility Standards Act, but enforcement is left to municipalities, and rural municipalities with tiny populations and massive geographic areas simply don't have the staff, resources, or political will to enforce codes on every quarter section where someone wants to build. According to the Government of Saskatchewan's own documentation, buildings under 10 square meters, about 108 square feet, generally don't require permits in most jurisdictions. That's large enough for a small cabin or starter structure. For larger buildings, requirements vary wildly by rural municipality, with some requiring only basic safety compliance and others having virtually no requirements beyond septic systems for permanent dwellings, which we'll address shortly. The septic situation in Saskatchewan is surprisingly flexible. The province requires approved wastewater systems for permanent dwellings, but composting toilets are explicitly allowed under Saskatchewan's on-site wastewater disposal regulations as alternative treatment systems. Greywater systems can be permitted through basic holding tanks or constructed wetlands if designed properly. Many rural properties use basic septic fields that cost $5,000 to $8,000 to install, manageable compared to Ontario's $30,000 engineered systems. Crucially, Saskatchewan doesn't mandate grid connection. You can live entirely off-grid using solar, wind, or generators without anyone forcing you to connect to power lines that don't exist in rural areas anyway. Water can come from wells, which require permits but are straightforward to drill for $1,000 to $3,000 in most areas, dugouts, or rainwater collection systems that are common on farms. Property taxes in rural Saskatchewan are absurdly low. We're talking $300 to $800 annually for 40 acres with a small dwelling, which is less than urban Canadians pay monthly in condo fees. The province needs rural population and tax revenue from any source, so they're not incentivized to regulate people away from rural areas through impossible requirements. The reality check: Saskatchewan winters are brutal with temperatures hitting -35 regularly and wind that makes you question whether humans should inhabit this latitude. Your off-grid heating system needs to actually work when failure means death, not just mild discomfort. Summer brings mosquitoes, black flies, and weather that swings from beautiful to tornado warnings with minimal transition time. Employment opportunities in rural Saskatchewan are limited to agriculture, remote work, or driving to towns for service jobs. This works for people with remote income, retirees with pensions, or those willing to live extremely minimally on very little income. But if you can handle prairie isolation in winter, Saskatchewan offers legitimate off-grid freedom. 2. Manitoba, the province that's too busy with other problems. Manitoba sits east of Saskatchewan with similar geography, smaller population, and a government that's historically been too occupied with Winnipeg's issues to heavily regulate what happens in rural areas where barely anyone lives anyway. The province has some of Canada's cheapest rural land and surprisingly permissive attitudes toward alternative living, partly through design but mostly through benign neglect. Rural Manitoba land sells for $3,000 to $12,000 per acre depending on location and quality. Properties of 20 to 80 acres list regularly for $15,000 to $60,000 total on sites like Realtor.ca, Kijiji, and Rural Manitoba Realty offices. You can find titled land with road access within 2 hours of Winnipeg or Brandon for prices that make urban housing costs look like elaborate scams designed to transfer wealth from workers to property owners and banks. Manitoba's building code is based on the National Building Code but administered municipally, and here's the crucial part. Enforcement in rural municipalities is inconsistent to non-existent depending on location. Many rural municipalities don't have building inspectors or rely on part-time inspectors who cover massive geographic areas and respond mainly to complaints rather than proactively enforcing codes. The Manitoba Building Code exempts certain buildings from permits, including structures under 10 square meters. For larger buildings, requirements vary by municipality, with some requiring only basic permits for permanent dwellings and others having virtually no enforcement mechanisms for rural properties. According to Manitoba's Department of Families documentation, composting toilets and alternative wastewater systems can be approved under the On-Site Wastewater Management Systems Regulation if they meet basic treatment standards. Manitoba doesn't require grid connection for rural properties. Solar, wind, and generator power are common and accepted. Water can come from wells, permits required but straightforward. Surface water sources with proper filtration, freedom. Newfoundland and Labrador sits as Canada's easternmost province with small population, vast geography, and regulatory approach to rural living that combines British common law traditions with pragmatic recognition that you can't heavily regulate areas where nobody lives and enforcement costs more than revenue generated. Rural Newfoundland land sells for $1,000 to $5,000 per acre, with properties of 10 to 50 acres listing for $10,000 to $30,000 total. Labrador land is even cheaper, with vast acreage available for minimal cost if you're willing to embrace genuine remoteness. Sites like Newfoundland Real Estate and Kijiji show constant listings for rural properties that urban Canadians view as impossibly cheap until they realize the trade-offs in isolation and climate. Newfoundland's building code is administered provincially with municipal involvement where municipalities exist. For unincorporated areas and rural regions outside town boundaries, enforcement is minimal to non-existent. According to the Department of Municipal and Provincial Affairs, structures under 10 square meters don't require permits, and larger buildings require permits, but enforcement focuses on safety rather than micromanaging how people live on their own land. The province allows composting toilets and alternative wastewater systems under the Water Resources Act and related regulations. Approval is required, but systems that meet basic treatment standards are accepted. Many rural Newfoundland properties use basic septic systems costing $5,000 to $8,000, or composting toilet systems with grey water management that cost significantly less. Newfoundland doesn't mandate grid connection for rural properties. Newfoundland Power and Labrador's efficiency. The reality check. Newfoundland weather is brutal in different ways than prairie provinces. Constant wind, fog, rain, occasional massive snowstorms, and dampness that penetrates everything. Your off-grid systems need to handle moisture and salt air that corrodes equipment faster than dry prairie conditions. Isolation is real with some rural areas, accessible mainly by boat or plane. Employment is limited to fishing, forestry, remote work, or government jobs in larger towns. Healthcare requires travel to regional hospitals, which can be challenging during winter storms that shut down roads or cancel flights. 5. Yukon Territory. Not technically a province, but who's counting? Okay, Yukon is a territory, not a province, but including it makes sense because Yukon offers some of Canada's most permissive off-grid living conditions, combined with territorial government that actually supports alternative housing through programs and policies rather than just tolerating it through neglect. Yukon land is available through various mechanisms, including purchasing private land, leasing territorial land, or participating in programs like the Agricultural Land Application Program or country residential programs that provide land for minimal cost if you meet basic development requirements. Private rural land sells for $5,000 to $20,000 per acre, with properties of 5 to 40 acres available for $30,000 to $100,000, which sounds expensive until you realize you're buying land in one of Earth's most beautiful regions, with legitimate freedom to build and live as you choose. Yukon's building code is administered territorially with enforcement focused mainly on organized communities and subdivisions. For rural properties outside municipal boundaries, building code enforcement is minimal. According to Yukon's Community Services Department, small structures under 10 square meters don't require permits, and larger buildings require permits, but the emphasis is on safety rather than micromanaging design or arbitrary minimum sizes. Yukon explicitly supports alternative housing and off-grid living through its policies. The territory allows composting toilets, greywater systems, and alternative wastewater treatment under its Civil Emergency Measures Act and health regulations. Many rural Yukoners live completely off-grid with